Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the place where we break down complex strategies and really turn them into insights you can actually use. And today we are cutting through a lot of noise to get to something incredibly valuable. It's a skill that I think defines success in almost any high-stakes situation. Composure. Our mission for this deep dive is to really master the mind under pressure. We want to give you a shortcut to not just feeling stable, but to thinking better when it really, really counts. We're not just trying to survive a crisis here. We're looking at how to get a genuine competitive edge.
Right.
And the source material we're using is perfectly laid out for this. It kicks off with a title that it sets the whole stage.
Yeah.
It's called Why Calm Minds Win the Art of Thinking Smart Under Fire.
And that title, that core idea, is so essential because it tells you right away this isn't about stress management just for comfort's sake.
Right. It's not just about feeling good.
Not at all. I mean, pressure is just, it's a feature of modern life, professionally, personally. You can't escape it. So this deep dive is about understanding the strategies that give you that undeniable edge.
Whether it's a huge project at work, a tough negotiation,
or even just the chaos of juggling family and a career, that ability to stay composed, it's often the one thing that separates high performance from
falling apart.
From completely falling apart.
Yeah.
So our goal for you, the listener, is kind of twofold. First, we want you to understand the science of what's happening, the stress, the calm. And then second, we want to move past just coping. The goal is to learn how to proactively, optimize your performance inside the stress.
Okay, so shifting from just reacting to actual mastery.
Exactly. From reactive emotion to genuine mental mastery. That's the journey we're about to take.
All right, let's do it. Let's unpack this and start at the foundation. Because to master anything, you have to diagnose the problem first, right?
Always.
So we're diving straight into part 1 of the source material, understanding the mind under pressure. And we're going to focus on the diagnostics of panic. Let's begin with the basics then. The nature of pressure. The source asks why our brains panic and how to recognize stress triggers. I think everyone knows this feeling. Your mind goes completely blank before a huge presentation, or you feel this totally irrational spite of anger over something small.
Yeah.
That's the panic mechanism, just taking the wheel.
And we have to start with the biology of it, the why. Because it's not a character flaw. It's a feature of our evolution. The whole thing is driven by the fight or flight response.
The old classic.
And, this system was brilliant for what it was designed for. It was meant to protect our ancestors from, immediate physical danger.
With predator and attack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second your brain perceived that kind of danger, it did something very smart.
Yeah.
It bypassed all rational thought, your prefrontal cortex, and just handed the keys to the limbic system.
The emotional brain.
The emotional primitive brain. And then it just floods your body with these really powerful chemicals. Adrenaline, cortisol, prepare for action.
But that's the key point, right? The mismatch. Our threats today aren't a saber-toothed tiger. They're abstract.
Completely abstract.
It's a looming deadline, a conflict with a colleague, a market downturn. But our brain, our ancient hardware, it triggers the exact same catastrophic chemical dump.
Precisely. The limbic system, it just can't tell the difference. It sees a high-stakes meeting or the threat of public speaking as a literal survival threat.
So it hits the big red button.
It hits the big red button, and that immediately compromises all of your higher-level thinking. When that pressure hits, all the energy, the blood flow, it gets pulled away from the prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, and gets sent to your big muscle groups.
Preparing you to run or fight.
Right. And that's why we get tunnel vision. It's why your working memory just shrinks to almost nothing. It's why trying to think rationally feels like wading through mud. The primitive brain takes over and it's just screaming, survive!
Not analyze and strategize?
Not at all. It's just, don't die.
Okay, so if that's the hijack mechanism, then the first step toward getting control back, it has to be seeing the trigger before the hijack is complete.
Yes.
How do you, our listener, start to audit your own specific triggers?
Recognizing the trigger is in itself the first intervention. It creates a tiny bit of space you need. And most stress triggers, they fall into a few common buckets.
Okay.
You have to figure out which one really gets you. Is it time pressure? Deadlines, feeling rushed? Is it social threat? Public speaking, fear of criticism, being judged?
That's a huge one for a lot of people.
Huge. Or is it a lack of control where other people are making decisions that affect you?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just cognitive overload. Too much information, too many tasks, just noise.
So how do you track that in the moment?
You have to be a detective of your own feelings. When you feel that gut punch of negativity, you have to pause and just label the source. Instead of "I'm so overwhelmed," you stop and think, okay, the tight deadline on this project is activating my known trigger around time pressure.
Ah, so you're not the feeling. You're observing the feeling source.
Exactly. It's a tiny change in your wording, but it pulls all the power out of the emotion. It turns it from a command, "panic now," into just a piece of data. A familiar signal is firing.
That reframing that's a powerful first step. Okay, so we've recognized the trigger, we understand the panic mechanism, now the source gets to the good part, the science of calm. What is actually happening in your brain when you pull it off, when you stay composed?
This is where it gets really interesting because we're talking about an intentional, a deliberate chemical and neurological shift. When you're calm, you are actively shifting control away from that reactive limbic system.
Panic button.
And you're powering up the prefrontal cortex.
The PFC. The CEO of the brain.
The CEO of the brain. It's the home of all our so-called executive functions. Planning, organizing, complex decision-making, regulating your emotions, impulse control, all the good stuff.
So panic is basically a chemical attack that shuts down the CEO. And calmness it's deliberately putting the CEO back in charge.
That's a perfect analogy.
But let's get into the weeds on the science. How do those panic chemicals, cortisol, adrenaline, how do they specifically mess with those functions?
Well, cortisol, especially in these big acute doses, is incredibly disruptive to the networks in your hippocampus and your prefrontal cortex. It's not just a feeling. It physically gets in the way of your neurons talking to each other.
Wow.
Specifically, it hammers your working memory. That's your ability to hold a few different pieces of information in your mind at once. And it also kills what scientists call cognitive flexibility.
Which is?
The ability to pivot, to change strategies when something isn't working. When you're flooded with cortisol, you get stuck. You just keep trying the same thing over and over, even if it's failing. And the adrenaline on top of that just narrows your focus. You get that literal tunnel vision, and you just can't see other options.
Okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting for me. If that's the chemistry of panic, what's the flip side? What's the chemistry of focused calm? What are the neurochemicals that make the system stable?
Focused calm is all about managed neurotransmitter levels. We're talking about optimizing for something called GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid.
Okay.
GABA is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in your brain. Think of it like the brake pedal. It slows down nerve activity. It stops you from getting overstimulated. By putting the brakes on, GABA lets the PFC, the CEO, actually do its job efficiently.
So it quiets the noise.
It quiets the noise. And we're also talking about managed dopamine. Panic gives you this frantic, disorganized rush of dopamine. It's like a manic energy. Focused calm, though, that's associated with a steady, sustained level of dopamine that supports long-term attention and motivation without the manic high and the inevitable crash.
So it's not just about feeling better. It's about creating a mental platform that is just fundamentally superior for performance.
That's it. Stability, strength.
And that stability is constantly under attack from these emotional traps. The source is very specific here, highlighting how fear, anger, and ego hijack your thinking. And these three are so tricky because they often feel justified in the moment.
That's what makes them so dangerous. They show up disguised as, a necessary reaction. It's so important to break them down one by one because they all lead to bad calls, but in very different ways.
Let's start with fear.
Fear. Okay, so fear it's the great paralyzer, but it also, paradoxically, pushes you into making premature decisions. It forces you to choose the option that makes the uncomfortable feeling of uncertainty go away right now.
Not the best long-term option.
Almost never. Let's say you're managing a project that's failing. Fear will tell you to hide that information from your boss, just hoping it magically fixes itself. You're paralyzed. You don't ask for help. You don't pivot. Fear wants you to play defense, to prioritize immediate emotional relief over long-term success.
But I want to push back a little on that. Isn't a little bit of anxiety, a bit of fear, sometimes a good thing? Like that sense of urgency can motivate you to get the project done.
That is a fantastic and crucial distinction to make.
Yeah.
There's a difference between productive tension, what scientists call eustress, and paralyzing fear, or distress.
Okay.
Eustress is energy that you channel into the task itself. It sharpens your focus. Distress is energy that you channel into worrying about the consequences of failing. It clogs up your working memory with all these what-if scenarios.
So how do you tell the difference?
Look at the action it creates. If the feeling makes you want to work on the problem constructively, it's productive. If it makes you want to procrastinate or obsess or just find some way to escape the feeling, it's paralyzing.
That makes sense. Okay, what's next? Anger.
Anger is the opposite of paralysis. It's all about action. But it's a very specific, very destructive kind of action. It creates intense tunnel vision. It shifts your entire goal to just winning the immediate fight, no matter how small or petty.
Winning the battle, but losing the war.
Exactly. You're in a tense negotiation. Anger makes you want to insult the other person or storm out of the room just to prove a point. You feel powerful for a second, but you might have just destroyed a valuable long-term relationship. Anger just done. It completely shuts down your ability to see from another perspective or think about the big picture. It leads to rash, punishing decisions.
And the last one, the most subtle one, ego. Under pressure, this isn't just vanity, it's something more dangerous.
It is. It's so toxic because pressure is what reveals the flaws in your original plan. Ego is that deep, subconscious need to be seen as right, as competent. So if you have to report that your project failed, ego stops you from being objective about why it failed.
You get defensive.
You get defensive. Or worse, you double down on the failing strategy. It's the classic sunk cost fallacy. You keep throwing good money after bad because admitting the initial mistake feels like a threat to your very identity. Ego prevents learning. It prevents the adaptation you need when things are changing fast.
So for you, the listener, this is all about self-awareness. Knowing which trap you fall into most often. Are you a fear person, an anger person, or an ego person? That's the key diagnostic step.
It is. Knowing your weakness is the only way to start correcting for that bias when the pressure is on.
Okay, so we have a thorough diagnosis. We've identified the chemical hijack. We've named the emotional traps. Now, let's talk about the solution. Let's build the toolkit.
Let's do it.
Now that we understand what's happening to us, we need to look at the proactive tools the source gives us for building strength. This is part 2, building mental strength. And we have to start with the foundational skill, mindfulness and awareness. How to observe your thoughts without being ruled by them.
It really is the foundation for everything else.
Yeah.
Because it directly targets the mechanism that lets stress spiral out of control. And that mechanism is our automatic habit of identifying with the stressful thought.
What do you mean by identifying with it?
The spiral starts when your internal monologue says, I am stressed. Or worse, I am a failure. Mindfulness practice teaches this really radical but simple separation between you, the observer, and the thought that you are observing.
So break that down for me. Let's say I'm thinking about a huge deadline. What's the actual practical difference between identifying with that thought and observing it?
The practical difference is creating what we call cognitive distance, a little bit of space. When you identify, I am so overwhelmed by this deadline, the thought and your sense of self are one and the same. They're fused. And that fusion is what fuels the emotional fire, which then creates more panic thoughts. It's a loop.
Okay.
But when you observe, you change the language. I am having the thought that I'm overwhelmed by this deadline. See the difference? You're acknowledging the thought as a temporary event. It's like a notification that just popped up on your screen. You're labeling it as data, not as a command to feel terrible.
So you're not trying to stop the thought, you're just changing your relationship to it.
Precisely. You're creating the mental space you need to make a choice. Stress wants an immediate emotional reaction. But smart thinking, that requires a pause. Mindfulness practice is how you build that pause muscle.
That precious second.
That precious second between the stimulus and your response. If you don't have that pause, you can't choose. You're a puppet of your own brain chemistry.
That pause is everything. But sometimes that chemical rush is so strong, we need something physical to force the pause. So let's talk about the most direct tools we have, the power of breathing and body control. These are the simple science-backed tools for calmness. Everybody says, take a deep breath, but we need the scientific why. Why is it so powerful?
Because your breath is the fastest, most direct lever you have to manually control your autonomic nervous system. You can't just tell your heart to slow down or tell your adrenal glands to stop pumping, but you can control your breath. And that control sends an immediate, undeniable signal back to your brain.
You're telling your brain, hey, everything's fine down here. We don't need to be in panic mode.
Exactly that. And this whole process is primarily managed by the vagus nerve. It's this huge nerve that runs from your brainstem all the way down into your chest and abdomen. It's the main highway for your parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest system.
The rest and digest system.
Yeah.
The opposite of fight or flight. When you stimulate the vagus nerve, it triggers a whole cascade that slows your heart rate, lowers your blood pressure. It effectively hits the brakes on the panic response.
So how do we stimulate it properly with just our breath?
It's not just about taking one big gasp of air. The secret is making the exhale longer than the inhale. That deliberate, slow, extended exhale. That is a specific physiological signal that the vagus nerve recognizes as safety.
Okay, so a specific technique.
The most effective one, and it's used in military and tactical communities for instant composure, is called box breathing, or the 4-4-4-4 method. You simply inhale slowly for a count of 4. You hold your breath for 4, you exhale slowly for 4, and then you hold the breath out for 4. You just make a box. Even doing just 3 or 4 cycles of that can measurably reduce your acute stress hormones. It's incredible.
It's a direct intervention. Let's talk about body control beyond breath. How does something like posture play into this feedback loop?
Our posture is in a constant two-way conversation with our brain. If you're slouched over, shoulders curled in, jaw tight, you are physically embodying the posture of defeat or anxiety. And that reinforces the feeling. But the reverse is also true. If you consciously adopt an open, confident posture, straighten your spine, plant your feet, relax your shoulders, you send signals of confidence and safety back to your brain. It helps stabilize you. And it's something you can do silently, right in the middle of a stressful meeting. No one has to know.
I love how concrete this is. We're making this abstract idea of mental strength into something you can actually do with your body. Stabilize the body, the mind will follow. Okay, now let's move to the most powerful cognitive tool in the toolkit. Reframing stress-turning challenges into growth opportunities. This feels like a much bigger leap.
It is, but it's absolutely fundamental if you want to build real, long-term mental endurance. Your first gut-level reaction to a stressful event is determined almost entirely by the label you put on it.
The story you tell yourself about it.
The story. If you label a situation as a threat, something that's going to harm you, your body releases the fight-or-flight hormones. But if you can successfully reframe that exact same situation as a challenge or an opportunity, your body releases a very different chemical cocktail, one associated with engagement, focus, and energy, but without the anxiety.
The chemistry literally changes based on the narrative. So how does someone practice that switch in the heat of the moment?
You have to consciously challenge that first internal story. When a huge problem lands on your desk, the panic voice says, this is a disaster that's going to ruin everything.
Right.
The reframing voice has to interrupt and ask different questions.
Like what?
Like, what specific skills will I have to build to solve this? How will getting through this make me more capable for the next big problem? You shift the focus away from the potential negative outcome and onto the process of growth.
So you start seeing the stressor not as something to just survive, but as a training exercise.
A training exercise,
Yeah.
a stress inoculation. When you see every stressful event as training, you actually stop fearing the stress itself. In a way, you almost start to welcome it because you know it's an opportunity to get stronger. It is the ultimate mental defense mechanism because it turns every pressure cooker into a future asset.
That is a profound shift in mindset. Okay,
Yes.
We have the diagnosis, we have the toolkit. Now it's time to step into the arena. Application.
We've gone from preparation to deployment. This is part 3, thinking smart under pressure. How do we actually use these tools, the pause, the breath, the reframe, when we're right in the middle of chaos? Let's start with decision-making and chaos, how great leaders and athletes stay sharp under stress. Right. This section is all about applied excellence. And it's fascinating because whether you're a surgeon in a crisis or an athlete in the final seconds of a game, the core principle for thinking smart is the same. It's about radical simplification. And that simplification is only possible because of exhaustive preparation.
Let's break that down. Let's start with the leader examples. When a system is failing, when a decision has to be made right now, what are they doing to filter out the noise?
The key is, great leaders don't try to innovate in a crisis. They execute well-rehearsed protocols. They lean heavily on pre-planned, structured processes, things like checklists or decision trees. There's even a technique called a pre-mortem.
A pre-mortem.
Yeah. Before a big project starts, you get your team together and you imagine it has already failed catastrophically. Then you work backwards to figure out every possible reason why it failed. This front-loads all the risk assessment. So if something does go wrong later, you've already thought about it.
So in the chaos, they're not thinking from scratch.
Never. Their job in the moment is triage. They use simple models to ruthlessly prioritize. They focus only on what is both important and urgent, and they ignore or delegate everything else. The leader's main job is to protect their own cognitive bandwidth for the 1 or 2 decisions that will solve 80% of the problem.
So it's about disciplined ignorance, in a way, ignoring the unimportant.
It is. They resist that urge. The panic brain has to get bogged down in all the emotional details and the noise.
Okay, so that's leaders. What about athletes? They're operating with zero time to think. How do they quiet that inner critic and just perform.
Athletes are all about instinct that has been honed by thousands of hours of practice. They are masters at getting into that state we call flow or the zone. And what's happening in the brain during flow is really interesting. It's a state called transient hypofrontality,
Meaning?
meaning there's a temporary quieting of parts of your prefrontal cortex, specifically the parts responsible for self-monitoring, for judgment, for worry. The overthinking conscious mind actually gets quieter.
How do they do that on command?
Through a radical external focus. They train themselves to minimize that internal chatter about, what if I miss? What will people think? And instead, they focus with laser precision on one simple external cue that's part of the task. A basketball player isn't thinking, I need to make this shot to win. They're focused only on the feel of the seams on the ball and the front of the rim. A golfer is focused on their stance, not the outcome of the swing.
The process is the performance.
The process is the performance. They simplify all the sensory input down to the immediate, actionable thing. And that frees up all their mental energy for high-speed, intuitive execution.
So the common thread is undeniable. For both leaders and athletes, it's all about preparation that allows for radical simplicity in the moment. You don't rise to the occasion.
You fall to the level of your training. Exactly. The preparation ensures that even when your thinking brain is compromised by stress, the correct response is almost automatic. It's clear. It's unburdened by self-doubt.
Now, let's go from the modern arena to an ancient framework that feels more relevant than ever. The Stoic mindset, learning detachment, discipline, and focus from ancient wisdom. This feels like a real deep dive moment.
It really is. I mean, Stoicism is thousands of years old, but it provides this incredibly practical, robust operating system for dealing with the pressures of the 21st century. It's really built on three core pillars that are all linked together.
Okay.
The first, and maybe the most famous, is detachment. And this all comes from what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control.
Things you can control versus things you can't.
Precisely. Stoic detachment is about drawing a hard, clear line between your inner self, your choices, your effort, your character, and all the external events you can't control. Other people's opinions, the stock market, the weather, the outcome of a game, these are all externals.
Why is that separation so critical for staying calm, especially today when we feel connected to everything?
Because almost all of our modern anxiety comes from trying to control things we simply can't. We burn so much mental energy worrying about things that are outside our sphere of influence. Detachment is the mental move of recognizing an external energy and then redirecting all of your energy back to the only things you do control. Your effort, your judgment, your response. The moment you stop tying your well-being to external outcomes, the pressure loses its power over you. That's a huge shift. Okay, what's the second pillar? The second pillar is discipline. And this is specifically discipline of thought and action. It's the constant, vigilant work of not letting yourself indulge in unproductive worrying or emotional spirals. When something bad happens, the disciplined Stoic mind tries to pause that immediate emotional rush and apply reason. It asks, what is the objective reality of this event, and what is the next rational step I can take, regardless of how I feel right now?
So it's the discipline to not catastrophize, which is a habit, a very powerful one.
It's a powerful habit. It's the discipline of judgment. A brain's first reaction is to attach a dramatic story to a neutral event. A coworker doesn't reply to your email, and you think they're ignoring me, my project is doomed. Stoic discipline is about challenging that story. See the event for what it is, an unanswered email, and then move to action based on reason, not on that invented emotional drama.
And that leads to the third pillar.
It leads directly to the third pillar, focus. Stoicism is constantly pulling your mind back to the present moment and to what is actionable. The Stoics were masters of managing their mental bandwidth. They knew you couldn't think clearly if your mind was always wandering to past regrets or future anxieties. So their constant question was, what is the task at hand? In our world of infinite distraction, that relentless focus on the present actionable moment is maybe their most valuable lesson. It's about aiming your attention, your most precious resource, only at what you can influence right now.
It's fascinating how these ancient ideas are a perfect antidote for our modern problems. They're not about fixing the world. They're about fixing the boundary between you and the world.
That's beautifully put. It's a timeless toolkit for resilience, built on the idea that true freedom is found in mastering your inner world, no matter what's happening in the outer world.
Let's round out this section on application with one more tool, the power of perspective. Seeing the bigger picture when emotions take over. This really feels like the cure for those emotional traps we talked about earlier.
It absolutely is. Think of perspective as your mental zoom out button. When you're in the middle of a stressful moment, your limbic system convinces you that this immediate problem is everything. It fills your entire field of view. The emotional intensity is at maximum, and it feels like an existential crisis.
Everything feels life or death.
Exactly. Perspective is what allows you to break that spell. It forces you to put the current problem into a much larger context, usually against the backdrop of your overall life and goals. So if you've just botched a presentation, zooming out requires you to apply something like the 6-month test.
The 6-month test.
You just ask yourself, in 6 months, will this single presentation, this one conflict, have fundamentally changed the course of my career, my relationships, or my core values?
And the answer is almost always no.
Almost always no. You're shifting the question from how painful is this right now to how relevant is this in the grand scheme of things?
And that robs the emotional traps of their power.
Completely. It's the antidote to ego, fear, and anger because it forces a rational recalibration of how important this moment actually is. You realize that even though it feels intensely uncomfortable right now, it's temporary. Your long-term direction is still intact. You shift your focus from the temporary pain back to your enduring purpose.
That shift from pain to purpose is the perfect bridge to our last section. How do we integrate all of this into a way of life?
Yeah, how do you make it stick?
Right. So the real goal, as the source makes clear, isn't just about getting through the next crisis. It's about weaving this mental discipline into a lifestyle. So let's look at the habits of mentally strong people daily rituals that build inner peace.
This might be the most practical part of our whole discussion. Because calm confidence isn't something you just find under pressure. It's something you build, brick by brick, through consistent daily practice. Mentally strong people don't wait for the championship game to practice their free throws. They're building the muscle when the stakes are low, so it's ready when the stakes are high.
So what are some of those specific daily practices? What are the rituals that build that strength over time?
Well, the source points to rituals that are all about self-awareness and preemptive stress management. The big one is routine reflection. That might be journaling or a systematic mental review at the end of the day. The Stoics had a version of this they call the examen.
The exam?
Yeah, you review your day, not just for what you accomplished, but for how you reacted. Where did I lose my composure today? What trigger was that? Why? It creates this powerful feedback loop that connects directly back to the diagnostics we talked about in part 1.
You're constantly learning from your own missteps.
Constantly calibrating. Another huge habit is structured downtime. And I don't just mean scrolling on your phone. I mean intentional disconnection. Mentally strong people know that clarity requires real mental rest. They create space for their brain to process information without the pressure of urgency.
And then just practicing the small things.
Yes. Consistent application of the tools from our toolkit. Doing a minute of box breathing before a slightly stressful email. Deliberately reframing your annoyance when you're stuck in traffic. We can call it low-stakes pressure testing. If you master your reaction to the small frustrations, the tools become automatic for the big ones.
It's so interesting that the answer to handling more pressure isn't always to grind harder, but to building these disciplines of rest and self-analysis. Okay, let's take that inner calm and apply it to the outside world. Calm communication, staying composed when dealing with difficult people. This is where the rubber really meets the road. It's one thing to be calm when you're alone. It's another when someone is actively pushing your buttons.
This is where mental mastery pays the biggest dividends, I think. In any kind of interpersonal conflict, your composure is what dictates the outcome. Our brains are wired for something called emotional contagion. If someone comes at you with hostility, your primitive brain wants to match that energy.
Which just guarantees escalation.
It guarantees a race to the bottom to mutual irrationality.
So what happens when you're the one who stays composed in the face of that hostility? How does that change the outcome?
Well, first, you break that cycle of contagion.
Yeah.
You refuse to let their panic become your panic. And second, you instantly gain credibility. In any conflict, the person who's yelling or getting emotional, they lose the trust of everyone watching. The person who maintains a steady, rational tone, they command authority and respect, even if they're delivering bad news.
And this all comes back to that idea of responding versus reacting.
It's entirely about responding versus reacting. A reaction is a gut-level hormonal impulse. A response is strategic, it's measured. And it's delivered after that crucial pause we talked about, the one you create with mindfulness and breath control.
So in that pause, what are you doing?
In that pause, you're doing a quick analysis. You're identifying their emotion. Okay, they're feeling disrespected. And you're separating it from your strategic goal. I need to get agreement on this point. Then you can choose language that addresses the issue without getting sucked into their emotional drama. You deal with the facts, not the feelings that are being aimed at you.
So calm communication isn't about being passive, it's about being strategic. You're using your self-control to guide the conversation toward your objective.
Exactly. It's strategic psychological leverage, and it's only possible through self-control.
Okay, let's bring this all together. Let's synthesize the whole journey, as the source does, under this final heading. Mastering your mind for life, how to live with clarity, calm, and purpose. This is the ultimate payoff.
It really is. This final part of the analysis just summarizes this beautiful synergistic relationship between those three things: clarity, calm, and purpose. When you really start to master your mind, they all start reinforcing each other. It becomes a positive upward spiral.
Break that down for us.
Okay, so clarity is about better thinking. It's the ability to see a problem for what it actually is without that fog of fear or anger or ego. And that clarity, which is enabled by having your prefrontal cortex online, just lets you make fundamentally better choices about where you put your energy.
Okay, so better thinking.
Then you have calm. Calm is the stable emotional foundation. It minimizes the highs and lows. And by reducing how often you get pulled into those emotional spirals, you're preserving all this energy for productive, focused work instead of wasting it on constant emotional self-repair.
So you have more energy for what matters.
Way more energy. And finally, that leads to purpose. That's about better direction. When you're thinking clearly and you're emotionally stable, you just naturally have the mental bandwidth to align your daily actions with your deepest values and your long-term goals. The Stoic perspective is huge here because it helps you understand that your real purpose comes from your own commitment, your own effort, not from external results.
So it's a feedback loop. Clarity lets you make better choices, which reinforces your sense of purpose, and that stronger purpose makes you more emotionally stable and calm, which in turn leads to even more clarity.
It's the ultimate positive feedback loop. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's an operating system you're continuously improving.
A lifelong journey of self-discipline. And the source really maps it out as a systematic way to just keep getting better at handling a world that is always going to test your limits.
That's the whole game.
We have taken quite a journey today. We started by diagnosing the biology of panic and really identifying our own personal weak spots: fear, anger, ego. Then we moved on to building a toolkit, using the real science behind mindfulness and breathing. And then we put it all into practice, looking at the strategies of great leaders, elite athletes, and of course, the ancient Stoics.
Yeah.
And the ultimate goal, as we've just discussed, isn't just about surviving the next crisis. It's about integrating this whole discipline into a way of life, one that's defined by clarity, by strategic communication, and by a real deep-seated calm confidence.
And that overarching message from the conclusion, your journey to mental mastery, is really that the value is 100% in the application. Just listening to this is step one, but applying it, committing to those daily rituals, forcing yourself to take that mindful pause, doing the hard work of reframing stress from a threat to a challenge, that is where the mastery actually happens.
We've given you the map. The science is here. The strategy is here. Now the path is yours to walk.
And if mastering the mind really does require that consistency, we want to leave you with this to think about. What single, simple, science-backed tool from our deep dive today, maybe it's that intentional long exhale of box breathing, or maybe it's deliberately applying that Stoic dichotomy of control to a problem. What single tool will you commit to practicing every day this week just to start laying that foundation of inner peace?
Commit to the practice. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into composure. We'll see you next time as we continue your journey of knowledge.